I'm Alice Lazzarini, and I'm going to be the second speaker of the opposition team.
Hi, I'm Cecilia Battaglia, and I'll be doing the third speech of opposition.
Okay, so perfect, thank you. All right, so since everyone introduced themselves, I will read you the motion. The motion is the following. This House would require all foods already on the market to undergo the European safety assessment currently mandated for novel foods. So, if everyone is ready, I will give the floor to the four speaker side prop. So everyone is ready? Yeah? Okay, perfect. So, when you want, for speaker of side proposition, the floor is yours.
Okay, my discussion will start in 3, 2, 1. Honorable judges, dear opposite team, good evening. My name is Erika Galante and I'm honored to be the first proposition speaker in this debate. Before I proceed with my arguments, let me briefly explain the significance of the motion and the terms that we need to focus on. First of all, this motion supports extending the European food safety assessment requirement to all products on the market because citizens' health has no expiry date. It is our duty to ensure that every food, whether ancient or innovative, meets the highest safety standards, protecting consumers from unknown risks and promoting trust in a truly safe food system, from producer to consumer. The terms I will analyze are novel foods. They are basically foods that people in Europe haven't eaten much before 1990. They can be things like insects, seaweed, or products made with new technology. Because they are new to our diets, they have to be tested carefully to make sure they are safe, healthy, and clear labeled before they can be sold to customers. And then I'm going to analyze EFSA, the European Food Safety Authority, and is the organization, the European Union, that provides independent scientific advice about food safety, and then undergo that it's be subject to. Let's start with a question. What kind of world do we live in today? Nowadays, food regulation in the European Union have failed to innovate the food space, while also completely containing all outbreaks. By separating all foods into two categories, we have only made novel foods entirely uncompetitive on the market. Not only it is our duty to safeguard our food safety and our international brand, but also to level the playing field for all producers, as we believe consumer safety and economic growth are two aspects that can work side by side. We want to give the EFSA more responsibility, starting from a list of all foods sold in the European Union, divided by the food itself and the bread of the food. We would require the EFSA to start analyzing the molecular structures. This is done to provide certain parameters on the safety of the food, obviously, but also to highlight the negative sides of many aliments that we for decades have thought to be healthy. To ease the consumers first and companies second in this new legislation, we would have the criteria that all food needs to follow gradually implemented, starting first from full consumer safety and then to have labels be fully truthful and avoid tricking the consumers. Of course, implementing full controls in all of the farms and industry of the European Union that produce food would be quite expensive. Although we have to take into consideration a couple of things. First, this policy will bring us, by our third argument, an increase of exports, providing higher cash flows into the European economy. And second, implementing stricter controls would obviously lower outbreaks of common bacteria like Salmonella, Listeria, and Fibro lowering the hospitalization drastically, also lowering healthcare costs for European Union countries. These funds can be redirected towards EFSA and the food industry to cover the costs of the controls. Remember, the prevention is better than cure. Applying EFSA regulations beforehand, we will avoid European consumers to suffer from potential health hazards in the first place. Applying this model, we will find ensured that what we believe are the three most important conditions for a safer and more stable Europe. Food safety, it ensures strict standards to protect consumers from health risks and guarantees the quality of products, and it's explained by me. Public confidence and giving alternative to consumers, because clear regulation can establish trust bonds while offering customers safe and transparent choices, and it's explained by Francesco. And economic benefits, strong safety measures and consumers' trust led to growth, competitiveness, and long-term prosperity, explained also by Francesco. One of the strongest impact of requiring all foods on the market to undergo the European safety assessment currently invented for novel foods, is that it would increase consumers' confidence and strengthen the European food brand worldwide. There are several examples of novel and normal food that clearly show how important food safety is for European consumers. Indeed, as shown by the EFSA Food Barometer 2025 paper, Europeans are becoming increasingly more invested in the safety of their food. As this trend continues, food certification will be not only required by law, but also demanded by citizens. When people know that a food product has been rigorously tested and certified as safe by trusted authorities, they are much more likely to consume it with confidence. Regulatory authorities, such as the EFSA, evaluate the potential risks, including allergens, microbial contamination, and chemical residues, to ensure these products are safe for consumption. Once these products pass rigorous evaluation, consumers trust them more. Fairness between all classes of food is also a crucial principle. Applying the same rigorous safety standards to both traditional and novel foods guarantees equal treatment, avoiding discrimination between categories, and ensure that consumers can trust all products equally. This level playing field strengthens confidence in the European food system and reinforces the credibility of its regulations. A great example of a category of novel foods that has become increasingly popular in the recent years, showing clear how more safety regulations often make a product more appealing to the consumers, is vegan food. Vegan and plant-based products have seen exponential growth in market share. Many new plant-based products, from dairy alternatives to meat substitutes, contains novel ingredients or combinations that require safety assessment. EFSA evaluated these products to ensure they do not contain allergens or harmful substances. Once consumers knew that these products met rigorous safety standards, they were more likely to integrate them into their diets, which drives both market growth and investment in sustainable foods innovation as a great alternative to traditional meat. One last great example of how important it is to have an extended scientific dossier also on other foods is the case of raw milk cheeses. The European Commission had no choice but to impose a ban on such products due to the impossibility to provide bacteria-free raw milk cheeses, such as the French cheese Belly Azen Blue, and also because raw milk cheeses contain dangerous pathogens. Therefore, applying EFSA level molecular analysis on food that fall into a similar or even the same situation as raw milk cheese can benefit the sale of these products while assuring customers of its safety. Also, the European Commission itself came to the same conclusion recently, voting EU Regulation 2024-2895 to implement new legislation and security measures regarding all raw milk cheeses production and sale in the European countries. In conclusion, as by what we have presented to you, we have proven that stronger restriction, maybe on the nations from which we can import or on the production lines, can improve public perception of the safety of our products. So that's why we think that we have to put on different foods some restrictions. This is the end of my discussion, and I thank the judge and the opposite team to have listened to me.
Okay, thank you for your speech. Your speech lasted 7 minutes and 40 seconds. So, okay, when the other judges are ready. Okay, perfect. So now we can give the floor to the first speaker, side up. When you want, the floor is yours.
Okay, my internet is kind of acting up, so if you can't hear me, like, please say something and I will
can hear
repeat
you.
it.
No,
You can hear
we
me?
are
Okay.
able to hear you. Okay,
Okay,
whenever you want.
good. Okay, so if everybody's ready, I would start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Good evening. At first, I would like to rebut some of the things that the first proposition team said. So they said, like they did a kind of an introduction explaining how the world we live in works. But honestly, they said like the world that we live in right now makes novel food incompetitive. That's literally the whole point. If you extend this like safety assessment, it will make all food incompetitive. So also they said it would increase EU brand worldwide, but actually that wouldn't happen because it would take so much time that we will always be behind, and we should all just make it like incompetitive. And then they said like stronger restriction can make like the view of food better. let's say. But honestly, as opposition house, why should we care about that? Like, we believe that extending time and extending because as I will prove later, it would just make it unsafe. It wouldn't make it safer. It would just create problems. So we don't care about the view that people have on food if you can
Yeah.
guarantee the same. Yes.
Aren't you aware that if you take more time to make further safety assessments, you're going to positively impact the safety of the European citizens? Do you really not care about this aspect?
No, as I will say later in my point, it wouldn't make it safer, since having to go to all of the food, it will only take so much time, and the food that really need to be tested won't be tested, so they won't be safer. So I would like to start to be like saying what is the difference between traditional and novel food. Novel food lack historical records of use. That's why they require testing. Traditional food have already been tested throughout decades of human consumption. Time is a scientifically significant tester, of a product, because long-term usage provides strong evidence of safety. Any harmful aspect would have been manifested since they have been consumed for decades. When we are talking about scientific testing, long-term effects often require years of decades of studies. Like human tracker population, it needs 10 to 30 years to observe long-term health outcome. So epidemiology treats long-term repeated exposure without harm as evidence that a product is safe. It's literally how the safety of traditional food is evaluated. So time itself is a valid evidence-based measure of safety. Human consumption without toxic effects provides data. A lab test can't alone fully replicate this level of data safety. So I would like to do the problem analysis. The proposition house uses the wrong kind of controls. The biggest food safety risk does not come from the food ingredient itself. Proposition making the food itself get checks loses the biggest risk, because modern food risks are not regarding the food itself, but the risk arise from external factors like chemicals that might be in the packaging, contamination during production, or even human error. There are all issues that are unrelated, no thank you, to the composition of the food. Proposition, by focusing on the food itself, loses the purpose by not focusing on what causes the toxicity. So regulation must be proportionate to the risk. Not all food have the same danger, requiring the highest level of regulation for every product, regardless the historical safety, violates proportionality and causes unnecessary cost. So, retesting carrots won't remove the microplastic that come in the packaging. So, as opposition, we believe that food already on the market, many of which have been consumed safely for decades or centuries, do not need to undergo the same assessment as novel food. We instead support the following: maintaining the existing system of hygiene regulation, contaminant limits, retraceability, and monitoring, and reevaluating foods only when scientific evidence appears that they pose a risk. So prioritizing resources through new and alternative products rather than retesting everything. So there are two main stakeholders of this debate that the first proposition team analyzed better. So regulatory institution and consumers and producers. And I will not waste time on that. So what is the path to the ballot? We have to prove to you that current regulation still grants safety to consumers that is up to new standards. By avoiding useless regulation, we keep a lighter framework that allows let companies produce more efficiently without damaging smaller companies that would need to spend to adapt to the new regulation, and keep prices down for customers and keep food competitive in international markets. So the metrics will be safety, proportionality of the regulation, and economic efficiency. So the first point is that this policy violates proportionality and creates unnecessary cost. So we care about this because the regulation should match the actual risk. If rules are stricter than needed, they waste money, time, and resources without improving the safety. Proportionality means matching the intensity of a regulation to the level of risk. So the whole purpose of proportional regulation is that the higher the risk products receive, higher level of regulation, while lower risk products receive lighter and more efficient oversight. This is because regulatory researches, such as scientific time, are limited. This means that if you treat all products as equally dangerous, you are wasting limited resources. So traditional food present extremely low risk because they have proven safety records. So a food that has been consumed for decades or centuries without population level harm has already undergone the strongest possible real world test. Long term mass human exposure. Please, panel, take this in account. Its risk profile is so much different from a novel food that it lacks any historical data, so therefore requiring the highest level of testing. This is the definition of a violation of proportionality. So high intensity regulation for low intensity risk wastes money and time. Undergoing so many tests is legit only if the product has unknown risks. But when applied to traditional foods, these tests had no meaningful safety information because we already know that this food behave in like how they behave in a human body. Therefore, the money spent on this test generates no additional safety benefits. Unnecessary costs emerge because the system forces companies and small businesses to pay for scientific work that does not change regulatory decision. So this means higher costs for zero added value from testing. So it's a useless cost. So proportionality is violated because the system does not address actual risk. If you must process a million of products, they have less time and they have less time and fewer resources to analyze genuine risk or novel foods. This means that the cost of the useless testing is high, while they retest carrots and chickpeas, they're not evaluating a new ingredient or contamination issues. This weakens rather than strengthens the consumer safety. So even if Pro claims greater safety, the mechanism of their proposal paradoxically reduces safety by collapsing the regulatory system under its own weight. So that's the end of my speech. Thank you.
Thank you for your speech. Your speech lasted 7 minutes and 43 seconds. So when the other judges are ready. All right, so thank you. Now it's time for the second speaker side proposition when you want.
Okay, can you just give me a minute to just sum up my ideas and start? 1 minute?
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, do you hear me clearly?
Yeah, you're able.
Okay, thank you. Okay, my speech will start. Just 1 second. Sorry.
Yeah, no worry.
Okay.
We can't hear you.
Now we can no more hear you. I don't know what happened. No? No? Not yet.
Okay, do you hear me now?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Okay, I will just 1 second. I think I have to raise my microphone. Okay, now you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay, then I will start my speech like this. Okay, now my speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Let food be thy medicine, or medicine be thy food. Hippocrates. Hi everyone, I'm Francesco, and I will be the second speaker for Proposition Team. Now, before we move on, let's start by refusing some points that the opposing team has made. First of all, they have said many times that our EFSA level regulations would be useless in our reality world because we would just waste time on unnecessary controls on what they call low-risk foods. However, what they fail to acknowledge is that low-risk foods many times do not actually have low risks, because you see the main problem with with conventional foods that we eat every day is that even if they seem low risk, many times carry risks that the system, the controlling system, fails to acknowledge. It fails to detect them. Let's take, for example, red meat, which has many risks related to health, and if mixed with other ingredients in our daily life, can be a deadly cocktail. If not a deadly cocktail, it will have negative effects on the human health. This simply goes undetected by the system that we have right now. That is why we need further EFSA assessments like regulations to be imposed on these foods. And what they are trying to convince you about that historical significance and acceptance corresponds to safety is completely wrong for exactly the points that we are trying to tell you. Because many times these problems go undetected because they fail to see the broader vision of these side effects that these conventional foods have, and also about their claim that the regulatory system will collapse. Well, it clearly seems like an exaggeration, because even if on our side we admit that these controlling process might take more time, however, it is the opinion of proposition team that human safety is the greatest of all factors every time. And we will prove to you that even if this may have some problems in the short term, in the long term, it's going to be beneficial for both human safety and the economy of Europe. Now, let's move on to the second argument. Stricter regulations would increase food and health safety. Now, before we move on, we have to talk about a reality that is present in modern day world, which is the grandfathering loophole, which is exactly what happens with conventional foods. What happens is that even if there are new laws and regulations, existing situations are not subject to these new laws, and this creates an unfair environment where current people and entities continue to benefit from old conditions. And that's exactly what happens for conventional foods. Foods that were eaten a lot by the European population before 1997 continue not to be subject to these strict controls for the European safety, because right now we live in a world where paradoxically the novel foods are more safe than the conventional foods that Europeans eat every day. Now, unfortunately, this is not only a risk, but a real reality, because as the rapid alert system for food and feed tells us, throughout the period from 2020 to 2023, over 6,400 notifications of toxin contamination in conventional foods have been reported, with protagonist elements being peanuts, dairy products, cereals, nuts, and dried fruits, which make up the lion's share, the majority of the diet of the average European consumer. And the question is clear now. If novel foods are expected to be a perfectly safe food, why shouldn't we expect the same from traditional food? Now, unfortunately, that is exactly because what the opposing team is trying to tell you. They're trying to tell you that historical acceptance, cultural acceptance corresponds to safety. However, we have proven to you before that this is clearly not the case, because many times, unfortunately, many problems with conventional foods, even not considering the broader field of vision, are just neglected, and this brings us to health risks that many times go undetected, and when we detect them, we only detect the effects, not the root cause. That's exactly the problem with conventional foods not being assessed by EFSA level regulations. Now, another important example is Norwegian salmon. Norway is in the EEA, so the same regulations of the EU on safety standards apply. And what happened was, once in 2024, the salmon, which is a conventional food, was fed with another conventional food that, however, contained a pathogen that caused salmonella outbreak in 200 Norwegian consumers, with 33% hospitalization rate. Now, this is clearly an example that tells us that we need more regulations that do not let these pathogens that create these health risks go undetected. And therefore, applying EFSA level certifications, we would identify hidden risks, we would force innovation to prevent contamination, and we would provide scientific basis for consumption recommendations. So what happens in the best case scenario? Let's make a comparison. In our best case scenario, we will create a food that virtually virtually is without any risk for the consumers. In the worst case scenario, even if we take more time, we're going to certify a food. We're going to make us, the European people, as proved by the first argumentation, know better what's contained in that food. We have a food that is more controlled, and we will make Europeans able to make more conscious choices. Now, the impact is enormous because we're talking about the safety of hundreds of millions of European consumers. And that's why we believe that it's very important to impose these regulations. Now, third argument, the food industry will be stimulated, fostering fairness and economic growth. Now, as we have explained to you in the first argumentation, trust is a key component in the European consumers aspect. Now, trust stabilizes demand, which means that the more people trust a product, the less there will be volatility between offer and demand. So this reduces market uncertainty and encourages long-term investment. So even if maybe these controls might take some time in the short term, in the long term, we have a more secure product and a product that is more stable on the market. Now, right now, the environment is also unfair for both the novel food producers because they have to undergo more regulations and spend more money than conventional food producers, and citizens, because citizens, the conventional foods that they eat are not as safe as the novel foods. Now, that is exactly why we need EFSA level regulations, because striking evidence comes also from a very famous food, which is sushi. Sushi was before considered a novel food. However, it was subject to a lot of EFSA level regulations. So together with its Eastern charm, people have started to trust sushi more because of these additional regulations. And what happened was that countless sushi stalls appeared worldwide and also around Europe, creating hundreds of thousands of new workplaces. Now, the same logical reasoning can be applied also to a conventional food, which is Parmigiano. We know that worldwide many alternatives, fake and harmful alternatives to Parmigiano exist. Now, if we impose these stricter regulations, we would give global consumers from USA, China, and India to even have one reason less to buy these fake alternatives because they know our product is certified for safety. And this would, in the end, enhance Europe's prestige worldwide. So in the end, applying such regulations to traditional foods, we will bring three major benefits: create more jobs and contribute to the economy, because judges clear here are crying, do you really realize how many new workplaces will be created both in the assessment sector and in the food sector by these additional regulations that we have proven to you? And it would strengthen Europe's position in global trade. European food are already very safe, and addicting other safety measurements is going to benefit them even more and make their economy grow more. And it would create a fairer and balanced competing area for both the producers of novel foods and conventional food. And that is an impact that concerns hundreds of millions of Europeans. And that is why I have never been more proud to be a proposition speaker. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you for your speech that lasted 8 minutes and 15 seconds. So, when the other judges are ready, all right, perfect. So I will give the floor to the second speaker, side opposition, whenever you want.
Okay, my speech will start in 3, 2, 1. So as the second speaker of opposition team, I'm going to do a rebuttal part about what the second of proposition team said, and then I'm going to explain our second argument. So I wanted to start by saying that they talked a lot about safety, but it isn't safe for the quality, but for the packaging, and also traditional food, about traditional food bringing harm is based on the quantity, not of the quality of the product. For example, red meat has impact only if ate too much. And last one, the example of sushi is not efficient because there will still be locals that produce it in a bad way, and so it will still bring damage. And so this brings me to my second argument. No, thank you. That is, a universal reassessment is unscientific, harmful to traditions, and reduces consumer welfare. The purpose of having food regulation is to prevent diseases and protect public health. For regulation to be efficient and justified, they need to be risk-based, which means that food undergoes the right checks for the risk they could bring. The system can treat bread like it treats synthetic labs grown proteins. So it also have to they also need to be evidence driven. There is no need to increase the regulation on food. There is that if there is no evidence, real evidence that the food that provides harm to people, it just leads to an efficient use of resources. The novel food safety
PI.
assessment. No, thank you. Targets foods that lack a history of safe consumption. Although modern science provides powerful tools to assess food safety, no method is more convincing than centuries of daily consumption by millions of people. A universal reassessment is unscientific because it ignores the evidence that assure the safety of not novel foods, when there is some problem coming from them, it's always from the packaging, as I said before. The risk with
PI.
novel food, no, thank you. The risk with novel food is that it's made with products with unknown toxicological or metabolic effects, requiring reassessment, ignores real-world safety data in favor of hypothetical risk models. If it's also not easy to apply all food, as many traditional foods would struggle to meet novel food standards because the production methods are not standardized and safety relies on artisanal knowledge rather than industrial processes. For example, raw milk cheeses or cured meats. This motion also tackles consumers' welfare. If regulations are applied, then fewer products will be produced. As explained before, many old food will not pass the novel food regulations. That will increase the price of food, and it will also make it more standardized and favoring big corporations rather than small local producers. This would not only as an effect on a bad effect, a negative effect on small businesses whose incomes will be demolished, but it will also reduce the access to regional specialties, affordable traditional food, and diverse dietary options. These issues are relevant for the stakeholders because for customers, the price of traditional food becomes higher, the choice is reduced, and there is a loss of cultural and traditional foods. Meanwhile, for producers, small and artisanal producers forced out of the market with the monopolization by large food companies. Regulators in states, inefficient allocation of regulatory capacity, increasing the administrative burden with minimal public health gains, and also erosion of public trust in food regulations, requiring all existing foods to undergo the EU Novel Food Safety Assessment, misapplies tool design for uncertainty to situation of non-risk, destroys traditional food systems, harm consumers through reduced choice and higher costs. Food safety is best protected through targeted risk-based regulation, not universal reassessment. And that's why up win, because our system is economically sustainable, whereas pro collapse under administrative overload, actively reducing safety. We allocate a regulatory effort where it actually improves safety, not where it wasted resources. And we protect European food culture and consumer welfare, which pro unintentionally undermines. This debate is not about whether safety matters, it's about whether regulations should be smart or self-defeating, and OP provides the only model that keeps the consumers safe while preserving the food system, economic and cultural effectiveness. So that's the end of my speech. Thank you.
All right, so thank you. Your speech lasted 6 minutes and 44 seconds. All right, so when the other judges are ready, okay. Perfect. Okay, perfect. So thank you to the second speaker of side proposition, side opposition, sorry. Now it's time for third speaker side proposition. When you want, the floor is yours.
Yes, please. Just 1 second. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, I'm ready. Can you hear me fine?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So my speech will begin in 3, 2, 1. Hello everyone, good evening. My name is Gennaro Ropolo and I'm the third speaker of Proposition Team. Now, as by my role, I will start by doing some computation based on what I found to be 4 main clashes during this debate. Now, starting from the first one. Opposition, we have talked about how novel food could become novel food treated the way as it is in a two-tier system can become uncompetitive in the state that it's presented now inside of our European Union. You rebutted by saying that if we made all foods novel foods by extending the stricter regulations to all foods inside the market of the European Union, we are going to make everything uncompetitive. Now, not only here you're making a false assumption without considering external data, like the fact that people can't simply stop buying food if everything becomes a novel food. But also there is an important thing to keep in mind. The novel food status has almost never failed companies in a sense that their sales have actually lowered, or when their food was imported into the EU, said companies that had the occasion to import them or produce them had seen low sales. The exemplary case of novel foods, probably from the mouth of everyone, is the vegan alternatives for meat, made from companies like I remember it was one called Impossible and one Beyond Meat. These are all companies which sell their products nowadays in every supermarket, and they had great success. Even though their meat they now sell, it's still considered a novel food, and will probably be for the next decades. So can we really say that the novel food etiquette and status of a food will actually make said food incompetitive in the market? Probably not. Then, also, a second important point that we have tackled is that food would be safer, as by our first argument, as our speakers have said. Although you have answered saying that food wouldn't actually be safer since it has already been tested by time, since time is valid enough as, how could I say, as a validation, as an assurance and a guarantee that a food is actually safe, since it has been eaten for decades. Although we need to remember that in this case, opposition is just trying to sell you the fact that more time and more testing is actually going to be useless. Just because a food has been eaten for decades inside of a country doesn't make it necessarily safe. Also because you have pointed out that contamination in a food could come not only from the actual food that's being produced, but from external factors like the packaging yourself has said multiple times. In that case, how does time actually guarantee the safety of a food if this the packaging that actually contaminates it? It's probably something that, in this case, stricter regulations can only be the valid choice to get. Yeah, sure.
Sorry, but what are you testing? You're testing only the packaging? Like, why wouldn't you make your whole plan about the packaging if that's the problem that you bring? Please engage with that.
No, we're not saying that the problem is only with packaging. We're saying that you pointed out that one of the problems would be packaging, and I'm saying you have made yourself a contradiction, because if you both say that time is the guarantee that a food is safe and we shouldn't have more regulations, at the same time you say that a food with external packaging could actually be contaminated if the packaging is not actually safe at that time, how can time in this case apply to the packaging to ensure that it's safe? We cannot say that. Also, we talked about how our food that has been regulated extensively through the novel food production could actually result in a heavier framework, we could say, use this word. And instead, a heavier framework would suppress, almost suffocate smaller companies, blocking innovation, while also, in a fourth point that we'll discuss later, create a monopoly from the large companies. Still, we need to remember that current regulations aren't enough, literally. Later we'll discuss about how large companies cannot become a monopoly, but for now let's consider how a heavier framework wouldn't actually be such a bad thing inside of your union. Since there have been plenty of cases in the past years, like the Norway example our second speaker has brought up, that happened in 2024, less than 2 years ago, that saw a problem stem not only from food that wasn't novel food, so food that wasn't really restricted and controlled the way it should have been from the start, but also it's completely its cause for the contamination, the salmon we mentioned earlier, was due to the nature of those food themselves, neither the packaging, neither the transport, meaning that stricter regulations are still very needed to ensure that the production and then the consequent transport of foods is maintained in all safety. Also, you have mentioned, yes, also you have mentioned that small companies could actually collapse under the regulation, but not only food controls, and in this case we're talking about the EU, so it applies in the EU, are paid and co-funded all the machinery that is needed to actually employ the safety controls by the EFSA, which we mentioned extensively also by the definitions, the European Food Safety Association, which was born with the Novel Food Act. But also there are several small startups that to this day are trying to get a license for selling novel foods. So just because a food becomes a novel food and that company has to extensively make sure that its food is under the right of a stricter regulation, doesn't make much sense that companies would sell it less. Because there are a couple companies which we have prepared an example in cases like this, called Biotech Meat and or Masa Meat, which is based in the Netherlands, which actually are trying to get a license to sell cultivated meat, which is a substitute for animal meat, but of course is not extrapolated by animals. And these companies are projecting huge earnings, since they believe there is a huge market share for revolutions such this. It's not said that every regulations like the one we're trying to propose will kill innovation of smaller companies, since many are still popping up to this day. It's just a question of time when they will be released inside our market. Then you also mentioned that your second speaker mentioned that the sushi example we brought wasn't good enough because it could be created with contaminants if not controlled properly by locals, since I don't know, maybe you wanted to say that in the countryside, sushi shop in the countryside wouldn't be as much regulated as in the city center. But again, we're just saying that more controls are needed, and this would include inspectory checks, just like there is still today for novel foods and also in some cases for conventional foods. Also, we need to increase regulations because there has been a case which was reported by Report, nonetheless, in Italy, where some caskets wine were I could say diluted with lower quality wine, which had aflatoxins and other bacteria inside, which wasn't properly regulated by current EU standards. This only could mean that we need to strengthen those rules to also include wine as a sort of novel food in this sense, to allow for stricter regulations, because Again, wine is a conventional food that has been sold for thousands of years in Europe. Still, time doesn't justify how it could be safe. Now, my speech is over. Thank you all for listening to me.
Thank you for your speech that lasted exactly 8 minutes. So, now when the other judges are ready, all right, perfect, thank you. It's time for the third speaker side up, whenever you want.
Okay, can anyone hear me?
Yeah, we are able to hear you.
Okay. Just a second. And I'll start.
Yeah, no worry.
Okay. Okay. My speech will start in 3, 2, 1. The moment proposition fails to prove that time is a scientifically acknowledged tester for safety, they lose this debate. Okay, so this is the third speech of Opposition House. What can you expect from this speech? First, I will start by rebutting some of the things that the proposition brought, and then I would go through the clashes. First of all, I'll go through the sushi example because it was brought also by the third speaker of proposition. They fail to acknowledge that the fact that sushi wasn't really eaten throughout the almost first years was because it was not brought in Europe yet. We did not eat sushi because it didn't come here yet. As soon as it came here, we decided to go to eat sushi. We did not need a regulation to actually acknowledge what was good. Actually, more people through time went through eating sushi because a lot of people ate it. No one had side effects, let's say. And when more and more people didn't have side effects, the others thought, okay, well, so this is safe. I can go eat that. And that is what opposition is bringing in contrary to proposition. Then about your second speaker, I think, brought an example about meat, raw meat, I think. And we are not saying that all traditional foods, including raw foods, are good and do not at all bring harm, but we are saying that you should not implement the currently mandated regulation on novel foods on all foods, including all traditional foods. Plus, it was brought a problem about the packaging contamination, the fact that both teams brought it, and the problem about packaging and contamination is can be prevented through other regulation. This does not mean that bringing the same regulation for novel foods over all foods would solve the problem. Also, we need to acknowledge that proposition is kind of changing the actual current regulation, whereas the motion says that all foods already on the market should undergo the European safety assessment currently mandated for novel foods. So this means, and this specific law or kind of assessment doesn't concern packaging and contamination. So proposition doesn't solve this kind of problem. It would be solved through other type of regulations. Then they brought us one of the clashes, but we don't. What?
PI.
Yeah.
Even if we have never seen that we want to change the EFSA level assessments, are you aware that, as you said before, as you say, conventional foods are not, novel foods are bad because they're made with chemicals? Aren't you aware that nowadays also conventional foods are made industrially with a huge amount of chemicals? So this brings down your entire argumentation.
Okay, first of all, I never said that novel foods are bad because of the chemicals in it. I just brought the fact that decontamination can't be solved through implementing the novel food assessment, the EFSA assessment on novel foods on all foods. Plus, we do not discredit the novel foods. We are just saying that bringing the regulation on novel foods on all foods would be a waste of time, a waste of money. Now I will go through the clashes. I believe the main clashes are 2 rather than 4, and I'll explain why. I think that the clash on the monopoly of large company is not really a clash, because opposition house didn't bring anything on that, and a proposition house, sorry, whereas opposition house, just by not implementing the safety assessment on everything, protects the European food culture and consumer welfare, as well as the private companies that would be damaged by implementing this assessment on all foods. And then the other one was about the competitiveness that the food would go through, and we implement that under the economy clash. So about incompetitiveness, we are not saying that all foods would become incompetitive, but we are saying that, as you said that more food would be more accessible, I think, and then some kind of specific food would be more accessible for people with specific needs. But the moment you need minorities to prove that your point is good overall, you are losing, but you need to prove that your point is good overall and not just for a specific group of people. Then I will go to the main clashes that are economy and safety.
PI.
No, thank you. In economy, Pro House said that it would implementing this regulation would increase exports, and products will be more bought because considered safer, but they fail to explain an efficient model and also don't acknowledge the time and money needed. We do not have infinite resources, so the money that would be needed for implementing this assessment, and also the time that would be spent to go through controlling all foods, would be wasted. Also, the fact that time would be wasted saying that you don't acknowledge a scientifically proven thing, that is that a food that has been consumed for decades or centuries is considered a scientific proof of why the food is safe. And then, well, the second clash is actually about safety. So ProPush is a narrative where throughout a stricter regulation, that is the same on novel foods, they get to greater safety. But going through those assessment on all foods, most foods that would go through these assessments would be proven safe anyway, because they already gone through time, so we can say they are safe. And at this point, we would just lose time trying to say, okay, they are safe, when all people already know they are safe. So also the impact of people deciding to buy specific foods just because they have assessment on it would fall. And I will conclude just with an example. Would you take a medicine that has been tested and inspected in a laboratory once, or would you rather take a medicine that millions of people have taken for several years without any bad after effects? And that is the end of my speech.
Okay, thank you, Cecilia, for your speech. Your speech lasted 8 minutes and 15 seconds. So now this first constructive part of the debate came to an end. Now it's time for the reply speeches. So I will give the floor to the replier of Side Up whenever you want. Replier of Side Up.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I would like to start. Sorry, let me get my timer. Yeah. Okay. So I would like to start in. Can you see me?
No,
No.
I don't think we can. I mean, now we can see you.
Can you see me? I'm sorry, my tablet is acting up today.
Yeah, no worry.
Okay. So I will start in 3, 2, 1. Good evening. Thank you for your debate. Of course, I would start my reply and make it effective in the long term, but unfortunately, I don't have unlimited time and resources, so I will focus and be efficient. So I would like to start my reply by analyzing the strategic error of the proposition house. Proposition team loses this debate the moment they can't prove why we should care and why we need these regulamentations. Pro also made a mistake by admitting that they will lose time eventually. So proposition, by focusing only on examples that were rebutted from opposition house as invalid and not having any type of mechanization, don't arrive to their impacts and were, let's say, kind of unfair since they didn't give up much ground to work with in the rebuttal. So even if they arrived to their impacts, they loved to create an unrealistic world with unlimited money and time. I would like to start by analyzing the two main clashes of this debate. They were safety and the economical aspect. So safety. The proposition house tried to sell that it will make the product more safe and made it be viewed as better like from customers. But opposition house believes that being stuck in the past, testing food that are already been tested as safe, will only lose time and make the EU fall behind. So opposition wins this clash because pro, attempting to maximize safety, creates inefficiency, stalling innovation since they can't prioritize actual high risk products. So what is the other clash is the economical clash. So proposition tried to prove that it would make EU more competitive, but they kind of contradicted themselves by saying that not all foods are uncompetitive. So as opposition team, it was kind of difficult to understand where proposition house stand. The economy will suffer from the widespread implementation of this regulation to all of the food. Proposition told you that the economy would actually benefit, but like how would that work? They failed to explain that. Even if it worked, the money would just go to big companies, but the ones that will really suffer, as explained by my second speaker, would be small companies. Small companies already struggle to make ends meet and to compete with the low price of big companies. Like the third speaker also said that the thing that will change is when the small companies' products will be implied in the market. But like these people don't have time to waste. They need the money to feed their children, to make them go to school. So as a opposition house, we stand in a place where we can't support this loss of time to make small business fall behind and make eventually the youth fall behind since they created an unrealistic narrative. So I would like to end my speech doing a comparative. In the proposition world, by attempting maximum safety for all foods, proposition creates inefficiency, stalls innovation, and reduces consumer safety because regulations cannot prioritize actual high risk or novel foods. And in the opposition words, what happens? Like targeted regulation guarantees safety where it matters, does not waste resources, supports innovation, and maintains affordable access to traditional food. So panel, please take in account what are the metric of this debate. The metric of this debate is who can prove safety, proportionality of the regulation, and economic efficiency. So that's the end of my reply. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your speech that lasted 3 minutes and 45 seconds. So, when the other judges are ready, we can give the floor to the last speaker of this round. So, okay, perfect. It's time for the reply of side proposition. Whenever you want, the floor is yours.
Okay, just 1 second. I will start my reply. Okay, just 1 second.
All right.
Okay, my speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Honorable judges and debaters, we have finally reached the end of this intriguing debate where I have identified 3 main points of clash that, in my opinion, in the opinion of proposition team, in our opinion, make it clear which side has won this intriguing debate. In this case, proposition team. Well, first of all, before starting with the points of clash, which are the safety of food post regulations, the impact on consumers, and the impact on the economy as a whole, I would like to talk to you about something. Just imagine 2 different types of people. Well, in the first place, there is a person which lives in a world which is not subject to these EFSA level regulations for all foods. Now, in the best case scenario, this person will just have minor health problems that may be caused by some conventional foods that are not assessed by EFSA level regulations. And in the worst case scenario, this person would have more severe bad health effects that go undetected by the current EFSA, by the current European assessment level for conventional foods, such as we have said to you with the example of wine that was contaminated with other chemicals, and for the examples of meat that we have done before. Now, in another world, there is a person which lives in a world which is subject to these EFSA level regulations for all foods. Now, in the worst case scenario, there will be virtually no impact, but the product will be more checked, more controlled. So in the end, that person will be able to make a more conscious choice about its purchases. That's what the opposition side is clearly failing to address, where in the best case scenario, we would create a food where the problems in that food will be detected, and we might be able to drastically reduce the number of people who suffer from food-related health hazards. Now, the economy would be also fairer, as we have proved to you that it's unfair to create a system where novel food producers have to go through more regulations and more money spending than more regulations than conventional food producers, and we would have more prestige in the European economy. Now, starting for the first point of clash, the safety of food post regulations, even though they say that they wouldn't be safer with more safety assessments, and they say that time, rights or wrongs without a clear lack of mechanization, we say that this is indeed not true. We have proven to you that historical acceptance is not a synonym of safety. We have proved to you with the examples of wine, with the examples of meat, and as we have said before, best case scenario, the food will be better. Worst case scenario, there will be more conscious purchase for the consumers. That brings us to the second point of clash, the impact on consumers. They say that consumers will paradoxically lose trust in the system if we impose these assessments for every food. However, we have said that, and they say that their health is not currently impacted by these conventional foods. However, we have said that many times, unfortunately, due to these European standards that we have today, these problems, these health-related issues might go undetected. And we are saying that with the EFSA level regulations, consumers will be positively impacted because they will be more conscious, they will be safer. And let's remember, dear judges, please accept our cry, the consumers will ask for more assessments eventually, because that's what basically the European consumers are on average going to trend. Now, there's the last point of clash. Last but not least, the impact on the economy. They keep saying that we lose time, but let's remember that losing time many times is not a defeat. It's a concession that is needed to make a clear and resounding victory. They say that EU will fall behind it, but we say that even though we concede that there will be more time spending, however, they're not addressing the prestige, the economical power of Europe, where that will come from the FSA level assessment. The wellness for the companies and the wellness for the consumers that we have said before. That's why in the world we live in, the consumers and the companies and Europe will be better and resound better from these assessments. And that's why I've never been so proud to be proposition speaker. Thank you all for your attention.
Okay, thank you for your speech.
Sorry.
Oh, no worry. Ok, quindi questo dibattito si è concluso. Volevo chiedervi gentilmente di aprire il microfono e fare un applauso alla squadra avversaria, di congratularsi. Ok, perfetto. Aspettate che fermo la registrazione, se capisco come si fa, perché sono sempre un po'... Ah no, l'ho fatta dal computer, scusate. Vi fermo la registrazione. Ok, perfetto.